Just about every kids sitcom that had a couple prominently featured in it had at least one episode where those two characters would take a break or split up. It's kind of just one of those tropes that almost has to happen because, well, you got like 20 episodes a season. You got to make things interesting somehow. There's a bit of a spectrum of how these episodes are done and how they affect each show, respectively. Although it's rare, some breakups are genuinely permanent and change the dynamic of the series. More commonly though, breakup stories might be used to split the characters up for a few episodes, perhaps even an entire season in order to add drama, but at the end of the day, still intend on having them get back together at some point, due to them being, as they say online, endgame. The Big Time Rush episode, appropriately titled Big Time Breakup, not only fits that mold, but also ended up being one of the show's most iconic and well-remembered episodes. While this episode did end up breaking up Kendall and his girlfriend Joe for a while, there's a few extra things that make this episode different, mostly due to how it was executed and why it even happened to begin with. Big Time Rush fans, take out your tissues because it's time to relive what was likely one of your first introductions to the concept of heartbreak, the Big Time Rush episode, Big Time Breakup.
Big Time Rush on Nick.
The Big Time Breakup premiered on Nickelodeon on June 25th, 2011. You know this was a special episode because Nick advertised it 2 weeks before it actually aired. They were truly treating this as an event episode. Now, okay, let me tell you right off the bat, I wasn't an idiot, alright? I knew how these shows work. You make the promos for the episode so dramatic and hype it up like something crazy is gonna happen, but at the end of the day, everything is gonna work out. Whole time, I'm thinking Joe not actually gonna go anywhere, bruh. I was dummy confident she wasn't gonna leave. I even placed a couple bets on DraftKings. Speaking of which, today's video is sponsored. No, I'm playing. Imagine. Made you flinch though, didn't I? For those who haven't seen this show in a while, Big Time Rush primarily took place in what could only be described as a luxurious hotel in LA for young celebrities as they fulfill their record deals, book movie or TV show roles, or overall just try to break their way into the entertainment industry. In the case of Joe, Kendall's girlfriend, throughout the series she's been shown to be an actor who was a regular on the series to Newtown High. Well, just like actors in the real world, Joe has always been open to other opportunities as well. So the episode centers around her finding out the good news that she's been officially cast in some Harry Potter / Percy Jackson ripoff movie that, like those other films, is based on a book series. But because of the fact that this is a multi-movie deal, Joe would have to temporarily move to New Zealand for 3 whole years. And to make things even worse, she has to leave this week, which, as you can imagine, brings down the mood of Joe and everyone surrounding her. Besides Carlos, I guess. This dude lived in his own little world for real. The only thing that would prevent her from truly getting this role is if she struggles to get out of her Newtown High contract. So while she leaves to go sort that out, Kendall and the boys prepare to head to Rock Records to record their new song. But not before James acknowledges that Kendall will likely need him and the rest of the boys this week for moral support. Now, typically when something like this happens, the best thing to do would be to do whatever you can to distract yourself. Issue is though, this becomes increasingly hard to do when Gustavo tells the boys the overall premise of the song they'd be singing.
When that special someone moves halfway across the world.
Talk about timing. This is when the episode splits off into 3 different stories, and naturally, considering the topic of this video, I won't be going too much into detail about these other plots. For the most part, they're pretty standard Big Time Rush stories. One of the plots has to do with Logan and Kelly trying to get rid of Carlos's helmet, while the other deals with James falling in love with a Latin pop star who will be recording some songs at Rock Records. Kendall meets Joe in the lobby and finds out that she apparently can't get out of her contract, meaning she won't be doing the movie. She says that she isn't too bummed though, because the alternative isn't that bad.
I love being on Newtown High, and I love
Say it.
living here at the Palmwoods.
Oh, come on, Joe. You didn't have to pump fake us like that. Golly. It turns out Kendall had booked them a spot at a restaurant regardless of the outcome, so he tells Joe that they'll meet up again later, but not before doing their patented goodbye kiss. Something that I'm pretty sure only existed in this episode, but it makes sense why they added it. One thing that I always appreciated about this show was how they could have easily made Katie, Kendall's sister, the stereotypical evil little sibling that's always up to something and wreaking havoc. Like Megan, or to some extent Gabe. She's definitely wise beyond her years, though I'm not sure where exactly it is she gets all this wisdom from. But regardless, like she does commonly, she kind of just spawns out of nowhere to offer Kendall some words of guidance. She tells him pretty bluntly that Joe is 100% lying, and even has the evidence to support it. Somehow, she has access to Joe's contract, and in said contract it states that legally, she is 100% able to do other projects if one is offered to her. Being oblivious, Kendall asks her why she would do such a thing, and Katie says it's simple. She did it for him. I mean, is Kendall stupid or something? I know he's not Logan or anything, but still. Another reason why Katie is one of the best characters on this show is because the writers made sure not to make her too smart. Despite Katie doing a good job in IDing the problem, how she suggests Kendall solves it shows her youth. Katie says that Kendall can solve this problem by getting Joe to break up with him. That way she doesn't feel like she has to stay and do the movie just for him. And the best way to do that is by being disgusting. At least according to Katie. So later at the restaurant that Kendall booked, we see that he's fully embodied the attire of an amateur mechanic who just got off of work. On top of that, he's following Katie's advice and starts acting gross and juvenile. Joe's had enough of Kendall's behavior and decides to unload the truth about how she got clearance to get out of her contract, but then lied earlier. You'd think this is when Kendall would soften up, but I think he's gotten a little too into character now. He gives Joe two options. She either does the movie or breaks up with him. And considering how Kendall has been acting lately, it doesn't take a genius to figure out which one she chose.
What? No goodbye kiss? Miss me? I'm gonna miss you.
You're watching Big Time Rush. We'll be right back. You're watching Big Time Rush on Nick. Now back to the show.
Katie tries her best to cheer up Kendall. She even brings in a clown.
And Mumbo the Clown!
Sorry, reflex whenever I see a clown. I've already gone through like 8 different laptops trying to get through the amazing digital circus. The good news is though, Kendall gets a visit from someone a lot better than a clown. Joe comes in and gives Kendall a goodbye kiss, saying that she never got the chance to do one last night. She also adds that after some thinking, she realized what he was trying to do, which caused her change in heart. Kendall says though that she can't pass this up, considering opportunities like this only come once in a lifetime. But Joe rebuttals that by saying that maybe guys like Kendall only come once in a lifetime.
You with me, Randy? Just okay. Helps, man. Okay. We're good, man. I appreciate it.
Then Joe talks to the studio herself and confirms that she's going to accept their offer and sign on to do the film, thus leaving Kendall and Joe about one day to spend time together and do whatever they want. But instead of doing anything grand or fancy, they decide to just stick to the basics and lay on a blanket underneath the sunlight. Next day rolls around and Kendall walks Joe to her limo to say their final goodbyes. Joe's driver informs her that they're running late, and so they're going to have to wrap things up. So the two embrace, and Kendall opens the door for her, and Joe begins her ride to the airport. So, in 2010, Disney aired an episode of Jonas LA, where Joe accepts a role in a movie that'll require him to live in New Zealand. Thanks to how Joe handled this whole ordeal though, his girlfriend at the time, aka Stella, decided that maybe she wasn't meant to date a celebrity as famous as Joe if this was the kind of stuff that would end up happening. So she decided to book a flight from LA to New Jersey and go home. Thing is though, Joe wasn't told any of this, and so when he found out, he ran to LAX airport on foot to hunt down Stella and convince her to stay. Well, these two shows were pretty similar in purpose and structure, and they played similar roles within their respective networks. So as a result, comparisons were naturally made. I don't personally believe that either were really trying to copy each other, but I couldn't not bring up how similar this Big Time Rush episode is to that episode of Jonas. It is kind of hilarious how both shows basically ended up doing the exact same thing, even down to going to the exact same airport. And now that I think about it, both involve characters named Joe. That's nuts. In case y'all somehow forgot about how this episode ended, Kendall realizes that he and Joe forgot their goodbye kiss and starts instantly panicking. as do the rest of the guys because they also understand how big of a deal it is. So, like in the Jonas episode, they rush to LAX airport to make sure Kendall and Joe get to share their special moment together, though this time I'm assuming they drove. While being accompanied by some super heavy action sounding music, the boys somehow manage to locate Joe instantly. Kendall catches up to Joe and tells her they forgot their kiss. Joe was aware but figured it was too late. Regardless, she's obviously very happy that he's there now so they can officially say goodbye.
Come on! You're holding up the line!
Hey fam, watch who you talking to. Hold on, who's that behind you though? Kendall and Joe share their longest on-screen kiss, very fittingly occurring right before what potentially could have ended up being their final moment together. I mean, obviously Joe ended up coming back, but it's not like any of them knew that. I don't even think the writers knew what was going to happen. The two say goodbye and, well, you know what happens next. What does one say about Worldwide that hasn't already been said? 15 years after its release, it's still one of the most well-remembered Big Time Rush songs of all time. I've never really been able to figure out why, but the music video is actually the band's most watched on YouTube. Only reason why I think it's weird is because Boyfriend is without a doubt their most popular song, so I thought that would just carry over into their viewership of the music videos, but I guess not. Genuinely, it is one of the band's best songs, and this scene, which doubles as the official music video, is one of the most iconic scenes of the show, with the boys singing to Joe as she heads to her flight. Here's the funny thing about this song though. Chances are, if you've come across this music video on any social media platform, especially recently, one of the things likely brought up is how hard James was singing in the song. And don't get me wrong, I think James has always been the strongest voice of the group, at least when it comes to just pure power. To be honest with you though, it wasn't just him. Oddly enough, every other member of the band has a more prominent role in this song than Kendall, the dude who low-key probably should have sang this one solo. Now, the BTR album was released in October 2010, way before this episode aired. It is definitely possible that the song itself was made before the episode. Then they just came up with a story to support it. At the same time though, Caitlin Tavers, the actress who plays Joe, actually did have to leave to go on tour as she has a singing career in real life. So this episode was treated as a send-off. I think maybe it's just one of those things that just ended up working out in the end, or maybe the intention was always to do an episode like this, regardless of if there was real life reasoning or not. But whatever the case may be, it was really funny how the entire episode is about Kendall, and the whole thing was leading up to the debut of this song, and he barely sings on it. Everybody had their own time to shine on a verse or on the chorus, but y'all had Kendall out here doing ad-libs like he's Takeoff. Come on, man. I will say though, while that moment where James seemingly interrupts Carlos, causing him to look back at him, is really funny out of context, I don't know how many people realize that it's really only a result of something the TV show would commonly do with the songs they aired in the episodes, where they'd cut out portions in order to make it fit within the 20 minutes they're allowed. Carlos in the actual song says, "You're the one and only girl on my mind." But then James' part of that verse either cleverly or coincidentally ends with him saying, "Girl, you're mine." The editors then figured that those words sounded similar enough to make the edit work, thus creating this weird and slightly abrupt moment. But it also doesn't help that in the full version of the song, James continues to show off and sing his heart out.
Girl, you're mine. Let's run to Tokyo. It's just one thing that I gotta do. Took you in.
Don't let my best friend be this bad out of shape over my girlfriend leaving. I'm gonna think something was up between them the whole time. Stuff like that happens in real life, man. I'm not trying to end up like Kenan Thompson.
Don't you worry.
Big Time Breakup, for good reason, is one of the most well-remembered episodes of the series. Joe's departure ended up being a really pivotal moment, one that gets talked about quite often to this day. For starters, one thing I've always liked about this show is that as cartoony and wild as it gets It usually locks in whenever they have to tell more dramatic or even romantic stories. I'd even argue that BTR does romance better than 99% of other kids' TV shows. And I say that as someone that doesn't even care that much about that aspect. Part of it is the acting and me being able to buy these characters as a couple, but a lot of it is the time truly spent trying to craft a cohesive story. Time that I feel other TV shows just don't do. And really, that goes for BTR as a whole. I always felt that the storytelling of that show, especially whenever they build something over the course of multiple episodes, was always a step better than most kid shows. The writing felt more natural and earnest, while also remembering to not overdo it and take things too seriously. I appreciate even the small details they do. For example, when the episode cuts to Joe and Kendall lying on a blanket, you think, oh wow, what a nice moment. But what made that shot even better is that we see them do it in the episode that aired exactly before this one. If this was like a non-kids TV show, I wouldn't think anything of it. I wouldn't have even pointed it out. But as someone that watches a lot of kids TV, you don't really see stuff like that a lot. My point is that a lot of kids TV show romances just kind of feel cheap, but this show definitely put in a lot more thought, making a moment like this really memorable. And then also, we gotta point out the fact that Joe actually did end up moving away. She came back in season 3, obviously, but the whole time while I was watching this episode, I was definitely expecting the plane to like turn around or something, or not even take off. But then the episode just cuts to the credits, and the next episode after this directly deals with Kendall adjusting to life without Joe. It's also the episode that introduces If I Rule the World, which is an absolute banger, by the way. Top tier song. Obviously, they kind of had to write her out of the show, all things considered, but this is one of the rare times where a TV show threatens to have a character move, and they actually move. And it ended up resulting in one of the best moments in episodes of the show. Not to mention, it's probably one of the best incorporations of a song that we've gotten in the series. Also not to mention that it was basically the starting point for a whole new story arc that Kendall would have to deal with in season 3, where he has to choose between Lucy and Joe, a story arc that maybe one day I'll cover in the future. As stated before, the Big Time Rush episode entitled Big Time Beach Party, for whatever reason, aired on February 21st, 2011. And although this special was advertised as a movie, it's really just a special, or an event episode, or a special event episode. That works. There is actually a difference between the two. For instance, iCarly's I Start a Fan War is a special, whereas I Go to Japan is a legitimate TV movie. It was a length of 3 iCarly episodes. But semantics aside, Big Time Beach Party definitely is not your average BTR episode. The budget was most definitely higher, and like a lot of event episodes or specials, we got ourselves a couple guest stars as well. BTR is no stranger to event episodes though. They've had a few, and usually they always go all out with them, more so than any other Nickelodeon show. It's honestly impressive. I'm going to assume that you guys have somewhat of an understanding of Big Time Rush, but for the few that don't, 4 friends become a boy band and make music together. Yeah, also it's made by the same guy who did Nes Declassified, if that helps. Without any further ado, let's get into the actual episode. The episode starts off with the band reminding Griffin, aka the head of Rock Records, about a deal they made off camera. The deal entails that if BTR were to secure a #1 record, the band and their friends would be able to use Griffin's Malibu beach house for the day. And considering they did in fact get a #1 record, the boys ask Griffin if he will hold up his end of the bargain. Despite the fact that they only went #1 in the fictional country of Kerplankistan, Griffin agrees to let the boys use his house. But only under a couple conditions. 1, they can't go anywhere near his vase collection, and 2, they can't even look at his car collection. The boys agree to those terms, and they begin daydreaming about all of the beach activities that they can do. This takes us right into the intro, which I gotta say, this might be the best Nickelodeon sitcom theme song. And truthfully, there aren't many bad ones. iCarly's slaps, Victorious' slaps, Kenan and Kel slaps. Yeah, you know what? I might have to give it to Kenan and Kel in retrospect. I mean, that one had Coolio, bruh. You gotta respect that. BTR is a close second, though. When we return from the intro, we see the boys outside with their friends getting ready to go to the beach. And this shot of all the characters kind of reminded me about how BTR has one of the strongest and best supporting casts of any kid show. Besides that one Ken doll looking dude who fortunately isn't even in this episode, I genuinely like all of the side characters. One of my favorite side characters is Jo, who unfortunately due to her commitment to the TV show she films, won't be able to make it to the beach with Kendall and everyone else. She can, however, go after she's done with the reshoots, so that's what she plans on doing. Meanwhile, in the I don't know, there's like 4 or 5 different plots in this episode. Let's call this one the D plot, since it's the only one that gets resolved in the middle of the episode. In the D plot, Kendall's mom finds out the boys didn't take sunscreen with them, so she does the most mom thing possible and decides that she will go to the beach herself, if it means making sure the boys are protected from the sun. Katie, on the other hand, wants to use this opportunity to meet up with a celebrity so she can convince them to make her their manager. Katie really is like a nicer version of Megan. She still be doing schemes every now and then, but generally it's just so she can make a few bucks. She's not actually trying to hurt anyone. They are 2 very different characters, but considering Katie is more than just a one-trick pony, I do kind of prefer her. Megan definitely had better lines though.
You can go on your dates after the 3 of you finish rebuilding Robbie's treehouse.
Whoa, whoa. By the 3 of us, I hope you mean Drake, Josh, and Josh's imaginary friend.
Meanwhile, in the F plot, yes, I'm being serious, Gustavo and Kelly fear that BTR will get too attached to the beach life, like the other Rock Records boy band called Boy Blast. So they come up with a plan to ruin their beach day. Spoiler alert, they fail at it. Now I don't have to cover this plot again. Back to the main plot, BTR and their many, many friends arrive at the beach house. And I gotta say, this is a really nice location to film. One of the advantages to having a single camera show is being able to do stuff like this. Zoe 101 also had a beach episode, and just like this one, it also looked great. Funny enough, they actually filmed this episode in December 2010, apparently, but when you film in LA, that's just the kind of stuff that you get to do. I'd believe you if you said this was like in July or something. The gang starts to lose their minds over finally being at the beach. That is, everyone except Kendall, who's bummed out over not being able to spend his time with Joe. He runs into this old guy who lives in the area named JD. Fun fact, apparently this dude is actually Chris Pine's dad. Who would have thought? He explained to Kendall that all the great beach movies filled with all the great beach movie cliches were filmed here, so he should expect some of that magic, so to speak, to rub off on his adventures today, which is a nice little fourth wall break that the show would do every now and then. He says the only thing Kendall is missing to make this a real beach movie adventure is a beach babe. And what do you know, one pulls up right next to him. Turns out this girl is a super fan of BTR, especially Kendall. I said Kendall, that's crazy. Especially Kendall. So the rest of Kendall's subplot is about him dealing with a fangirl whose name is Sandy. The B plot, on the other hand, is centered around Logan and Carlos, who are on a hunt to find money on the beach. Logan wants it to pay for his med school, whereas Carlos wants to use it to buy a beach house. You'd think Logan's mom would be like, taking money aside from their music and world tours in order to help pay for his med school, but sure, beach money works too. In the C plot, James wipes out after attempting to surf on a wave. And waking him up is a new mystery girl named Annie, who is played by our first guest star, or second if you want to count Chris Pine's dad, Gage Golightly. If she looks familiar, you might know her from the Nickelodeon series The Troop, in which she played Haley. She was also in True Jackson VP, where she played a character named Vanessa. And she was in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, where she played a character named Vanessa. What worries James, though, is that right when she was about to tell him her name, she makes the dolphin noise. Remember that. Anyway, back to the B plot. Logan and Carlos think they come across something valuable, only for them to realize that instead, you know what? For those who don't remember this episode, I'm gonna play the clip so your jaw can drop onto the floor.
It's a giant silver earring! This thing must be worth like... me beach now! Yeah, real pirates! Not just any pirate, Patchy the pirate.
Yup. Patchy the Pirate from SpongeBob is just casually in this episode. I remember in 2018 I went on this thing where I would rewatch episodes of Big Time Rush, and I actually went through the entire show. And when I got to this episode, I was amazed because I had completely forgotten about this subplot. Like, I remember the episode, but I don't remember this character appearing in it. This is why I like the world of shows like Big Time Rush, because although they can be over the top sometimes, they're also the only kind of shows that can do stuff like this and make it work. We got a whole SpongeBob crossover right now, and although it feels just a tad weird, it's not completely out of place. This does create an interesting paradox though. In SpongeBob, Patchy the Pirate is someone that appears in segments that seemingly take place in our world, meaning SpongeBob is a fictional character, not a real person, considering Patchy is a fan of him. This would mean that in the BTR universe, SpongeBob likely exists as a cartoon, but considering Patchy appears in episodes of SpongeBob, well, then what? Now yeah, technically you could say that in BTR world, the Patchy segments simply don't air with the episode, which is something I'm willing to go with. However, all of this falls apart when we remember that in the 20th anniversary episode of SpongeBob, Patchy meets SpongeBob and they hug. So now I don't know what to think. Fortunately, this isn't that kind of video though, so I don't need to figure it out, but it is interesting nonetheless. I really want to know what possessed Nick to do this crossover, man. It's so bizarre. Patchy says he's there to dig up the buried treasure of his great-grandfather, Scratchy the Pirate. So the boys tag along with him on his voyage. Why not? And back to the A-plot, Kendall is still dealing with Sandy, the crazy beach babe.
Really?
My Boyfriend is my favorite song. It's playing in my head right now.
Cool.
Why did she turn her head like that, bruh? Turn it any fashion, she gonna end up like Gwen Stacy. That's crazy. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. Kendall tries to walk away from her and towards the beach house, but as he's making his way there, his mom stops him and attempts to spray some suntan lotion on him.
Cool to see you at the. Oh no!
Oh, you can run, but you can't hide! Kendall, Donald Knight!
Kendall makes his way to the beach house and whoa! How did she get there so fast?
I broke up with my boyfriend.
So we can go out!
You're watching Big Time Rush. We'll be right back. You're watching Big Time Rush on Nick. Now back to the show.
Things take a turn for the worse when we come back from commercial break, as it's revealed that Sandy posted the picture she took of her and Kendall online. And of course, this managed to get back to Joe, who, in case you forgot, is filming her TV show. Kendall tries to explain things to her, but Sandy takes the phone, hangs up on Joe, and then chucks it into a pool. That's insane. Meanwhile, in the, what is it, C-plot? Yeah, James gets to know Annie, but because of a few interesting interactions with her, such as her saying she practically grew up in the water, and the fact that she eats raw clams, this idiot James starts to believe that she's a mermaid. So he kidnaps Camille, who I completely forgot was in the show, and asks her for her thoughts on the situation. You're playing a dangerous game here, James. It wasn't all that long ago when you and Camille accidentally kissed. And you better watch out before Logan almost punches you again. Issue is, Camille is kinda insane, so naturally she believes that it is definitely possible that Annie's a mermaid. This is the one thing about BTR that annoys me a bit. Like, sometimes these characters are legitimately stupid. Like, dangerously stupid. Like, even earlier, remember that old dude? Yeah, well, in the beginning of the episode, he told Kendall it was actually him, but from the future. And Kendall actually believed him for a split second. You ever see that scene from Community where Troy almost runs into a wall because for a split second he believed it was a portal to another dimension? That's basically almost everyone in Big Time Rush. Sometimes it's funny, but other times it's a bit ridiculous, and this is one of those times. Meanwhile, in the F plot, I think, Katie goes up to the nearest celebrity house, who just so happens to be, oh, phew, I thought it was Jared Leto at first, but nah, it's just Russell Brand. Oh wait, yeah, so this didn't particularly age well. Katie, you better stay away from him and keep the family away. To sum this part up, so I don't have to keep going back to it, Russell eventually lets Katie manage him. There we go. Okay, back to the A-plot. Kendall enlists the Jennifers to help him make Sandy believe that he's a player and doesn't want to be tied down to one girl. Hey, y'all ever realize that they completely recast the blonde Jennifer from like season 1? She is a completely different person by the time season 2 starts. I kind of like the OG one more, I'm not gonna lie. This one just kind of looks like Angelica's mom from Rugrats. Kendall tries things out with the Jennifers, but Sandy realizes this isn't real and he's just trying to make her jealous. So this girl whips out her phone, takes a pic of Kendall with the Jennifers, and sends it to Joe's Scuttlebutter, which is a social media app apparently. So Joe calls blonde Jennifer to ask what's going on, and right as Kendall tries to explain it, Sandy chucks the phone again. This girl is crazy, bruh. We then cut to a nice little montage scene / music video set to the band song Boyfriend. And throughout the montage, we see advances being made on the main 3 plots. Kendall is trying to hide from Sandy, James is trying to splash water on Annie since according to Camille, that's one way to force her mermaid self to appear, and Patchy and the boys realize that they're getting closer to finding their treasure. I actually really like this montage, not just because Boyfriend is one of my favorite BTR songs. It's silly, it's goofy, but most importantly, it's fun. As has been most of this special. The fun gets interrupted though by Mama Knight, who successfully is able to spray suntan lotion all over the boys using water guns. I know this is a kids TV show, but I can't help but point out how bad the parenting is here on Mama Knight's part. Like, she's just letting her 10-year-old daughter walk around to different celebrities' houses. You know how many creeps there are in Hollywood? Like, imagine she just stumbles across Drake's house or something. We'd never see her again. Jokes aside, Mrs. Knight really is a good mom though. One of Nick's best. As if the party couldn't get any more pooped, Chris Pine's dad runs up to Kendall and reminds him of something he said earlier. When his character is first introduced, he starts listing a bunch of different beach movie cliches, all of which ended up actually happening in this episode. However, at the time he couldn't quite remember the last one. Well, he remembers now, and he tells Kendall what it is.
A bad guy always shows up halfway through the movie to beat you up.
What? You're the dead man who stole my Sandy. Prepare to get pummeled!
I told you it was a magical beach.
To make this situation even worse for Kendall, Sandy pulls up right next to him and gives him a really tight hug, claiming that they are in love. Tad, which is a horrible name by the way, swears that he will get his revenge on Kendall for stealing his girl. In the B or C plot, I don't really remember at this point, Carlos, Logan, and Patchy realize that the beach house was built on top of the treasure, so the only way to get to it is by digging. A lot. Realizing they can't just start digging in the middle of the beach house living area, they instead go to the basement since they're under the assumption that Griffin won't care. They quickly realize they were wrong though, as his basement is where his priceless vase collection is stored. Carlos manages to convince Logan that even if they break some vases while trying to get the treasure, it won't matter since they can just buy and replace them once they get to the riches. Because of this, Carlos not so cautiously uses a jackhammer to break into the ground, causing almost all of the priceless artifacts around him to break. That's not much of a concern for Carlos and Patchy though, because they finally were able to break into the ground and pull out the treasure chest that was underneath. They all get really excited at first, but the excitement mellows out once they realize the chest is locked. Fortunately for them, there's a cannon store nearby, so Patchy was able to purchase one to aid them in their operation. He lights the match, but the trio realize they've made a severe and continuous lapse in their judgment, so they quickly try to blow out the candle. Unfortunately, they're too slow, and they blow a hole in one of Griffin's cars, which in case you forgot was one of the areas they were told to stay away from. They're pretty bummed that nothing has gone their way the past few hours. Patchy says it's strange that they were having such bad luck because he was carrying his lucky key with him. A key that was passed down from generation to generation. Common sense hits him and everyone else, so they use the key to unlock the treasure and voila! In it is loads and loads of priceless artifacts and metals. The gang starts to celebrate and list off things they're going to buy now that they're rich. However, this celebration gets cut short by Griffin claiming that he has surveillance cameras everywhere, and he saw the whole thing. He says that he plans on using all of that to pay for his sports car and vase collection, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Honestly though, I was surprised to see that there was actually treasure in there. I thought for sure it would be a misdirection. And then because of the damage that Carlos and Logan did to his car and vase collection, Griffin would just make them pick up extra jobs in the studio or something to help pay off their debt. Even if it took decades, I don't know. I feel like I kind of like my solution better, but this subplot wrapped up pretty well. In the C plot, James is still of the mindset that Annie is a mermaid. However, he still really likes her, so he does his best to adapt to living an aquatic lifestyle to appease her. But ultimately, he realizes that he cannot give up cheeseburgers for raw clams. So, Camille gives James advice on how to end things with her in a respectful way, and warns him to not get caught up in the moment and kiss her. And yes, she is totally talking from experience. James goes down there and tries to end things with Annie, claiming that although they're from two different worlds, he will never forget her. Annie, rightfully so, is confused by this because she thought things were going well, so she leans in and kisses him, hoping that would change his mind. Instead, it just kind of makes him do the cramp from that one episode of SpongeBob.
Tommy, I've got a fresh loaded lot. Tommy!
This plot is kind of ridiculous, ain't it? Camille asks Annie if she's a mermaid and, well, she says no, because they don't exist. James gets up and asks for clarification about some of the things she said and did earlier that made him think that she's a mermaid, and she responds by saying that she was raised around water because she's been swimming professionally since she was 3, and she ate the clam because it's a trick her dad, who runs a restaurant called The Ocean Floor, showed her. Thing is though, that doesn't really explain the dolphin noise from earlier in the episode. Did she just try to speak, but then some dummy loud dolphin from the ocean coincidentally started talking at the same time? But even then, look at the guitar dude's reaction. It makes it seem like the noise came directly from her. I know I'm stupid, especially after recent events, but I'm not missing something, right? Anyway, they get back together, even though if I was her, I wouldn't want to date someone who thought mermaids were real. But whatever. It's time we finally wrap up the biggest and best plot of the entire special, the A plot. JD suggests to Kendall and Tad that the only way to settle this is a drag race. If Kendall wins, Tad and his crew have to leave the beach forever. But if Tad wins, Kendall and his crew have to do that same thing. Even though he's hesitant at first, Kendall agrees, and the race is officially happening. Also, Gustavo dies.
High five!
Tad sets the ground rules for the drag race, including location and time, and Kendall has 1 hour to prepare. Only issue is, he's never ridden an ATV before, so he's really just gonna have to do this with no experience, just vibes. That's tough. Fortunately for him though, Guitar Dude went around to the other subplots and gathered up Kendall's friends to support him. And he gets in the middle and serves as a flag girl. She then takes off her hair ribbon thing and throws it on the ground, signifying that the race has commenced. Immediately, things aren't looking good for Kendall, as he has no idea how to start the ATV. He finally gets it going though and trails behind Tad, and at one point, presumably through the power of friendship, Kendall takes the lead. He starts to lose his lead though, and after Tad pushes him out of bounds, which is a very Zaza Pachulia thing to do by the way, Kendall does the impossible. Yeah! Y'all hear that needle drop though? That was perfect. Hold on, let's run that back. Ah, that was tough. That was tough. Kendall miraculously gets the W, and all of his friends celebrate with him. He then hits Tad with a Damian Lillard, and when Sandy goes up to him to try to talk, Kendall immediately denies her, claiming that Joe is the only girl he needs. And as it turns out, Camille was on the phone with her the entire time, and she heard everything. Yeah, W, Kendall. Look how happy he is. Yeah, just wait until she moves to another country and leaves you behind, bruh. And then you have to bust out worldwide. Enjoy it while it lasts, brother. Anyway, the episode wraps up with the band performing at Russell Brand's beach party, covering Dance, Dance, Dance by the Beach Boys. I have no idea how much of that I was actually able to play because of copyright, so if it ends abruptly, don't blame me. Although, they never officially did release this cover, so, you know what, let's turn it back up. Yeah, no, Katie, don't touch him.
Nick. Nickelodeon.
Nice. That's nice.
Man, oh man, now this is an event episode. High stakes, check. Taking place at an entirely different location, check. Guest stars, check. I mean, there are 2 of them, bruh. 3 if you count Patchy the Pirate. They really went all out for this episode. I don't have many complaints. Let's talk about the story for a second. The episode had a bunch of different stuff going on at the same time, and although not all of these stories were great, I felt like they handled them all pretty well in terms of pacing and timing. It didn't feel like a bloated episode. Every character was adding something to it. The stories themselves, though, like I said, were not all great. The Kendall one was solid, and it was definitely the best of the episode. Plus, it had that epic conclusion that was much so needed to top off an episode like this one. The most random subplot was the Patchy the Pirate one, but even then, it wasn't bad. I think we needed a fun, silly plot that was nonsensical to, I guess, relax on. The plot that I felt was really dumb, though, was the James one. It started off fine, but eventually reached a point of ridiculousness that fell out of place even for this show. And overall, it was just kind of painful to watch. I mean, come on. And then as for the minor plots, the mom subplot with the sunblock was pretty fun. That's a bar, hold on. The mom subplot with the sunblock was pretty fun. The Katie one with Russell Brand was mid, and the Gustavo one was, I don't know, passable, I guess. On their own, they may not be strong plots, but together, they did create a pretty epic beach special. The new characters they added were pretty cool too, not gonna lie. I actually thought Sandy was kind of funny. Tad too. And I mean, Patchy the Pirate was of course great to see. What an unexpected appearance. Annie was fine, didn't really need to do much, but she served her purpose for her respective plot, and that's all you can ask. Also, shout out JD, man, what a legend. And I mean, ending it with the Beach Boys cover? Stop it. Genius. Pure genius. This episode is a classic. Nickelodeon fumbled the bag for not dropping this during the summer. This would have been perfect. one of the best episodes of one of Nick's best sitcoms. This episode for me gets an 8.5 out of 10. Made me feel like a teenager again. Premiering on August 20th, 2010, the special centers around the band celebrating not only their first CD being completed, but also the announcement of their first tour. They start daydreaming over what it would be like, and we see them envisioning themselves playing in Times Square. What's interesting though is that this footage is actually taken from a real BTR concert that they really had in Times Square. Nickelodeon even aired a special about it. This is one of the things about this show that I always thought was clever, how they'd sometimes blur the lines between the show and the band in real life. There was another episode that did something similar. Matter of fact, it was the first episode of season 3. Plus, seeing the actual Times Square footage, albeit only appearing in spurts, is just visually so much better than what most of the other Nick shows have to offer, since a lot of them go for the multi-camera style of sitcom. Even though the boys are very excited for this opportunity, it doesn't come without its baggage. In this case, being the sheer amount of intense training that they have to do to get ready for their tour. Gustavo hires not only a professional dancer to help them out with their moves on stage, but also another teen pop star, Dax Sivan, to teach them how to interact with fans while performing, even giving the boys cones so they know how to operate without always turning their heads and seeing their surroundings. Fun fact, this dude playing Dak is actually the original guy they had playing Kendall's character before they went with, well, Kendall. As far as their training goes, as you can imagine, things do not start off too hot, but after staying persistent, they slowly start to get the hang of things. Another thing I really like about this show is how they portrayed the band's rise to fame. Some kids shows will do the whole overnight sensation thing, and I feel like that's really lazy. Now this show had them slowly becoming famous over time, with their rise to the top being the entire premise of season 1, and honestly even a bit of season 2. There are even little things in this episode that connected to the show's pilot, a few of which we'll talk about a little later, but one of the main ones being how the whole thing really started with James. And it's his drive to finally accomplish what he wants that pushes the whole band to really lock in on the whole learning how to perform thing. Unfortunately for them though, things take a shocking turn when Arthur Griffin, the CEO of Rock Records, comes in and announces that the CD, tour, and the band as a whole have been canceled, mainly due to the accounting department believing that the band is just too risky financially. Man, imagine putting all that work into something just for it to be canceled thanks to the higher-ups deeming it financially hazardous. You'd have thought the band was owned by WB or something. Instead, they are replacing the band with audio children's books since they're a lot cheaper to make and bring in a solid amount of money. Oh yeah, also they're going to be read by Ed Begley Jr. And shout out Dr. Linkletter. Unfortunately for the boys, this means that they just have to go home since they are no longer able to stay at the Palm Woods. And while 3 of them have decided that it's just best to move on, James is not only in denial, but also hell-bound on getting what he's wanted his entire life. A chance at the big time. Kendall brings up a good point though. As great as the whole boy band opportunity was for them, it wasn't always something they wanted to do. For example, he wanted to be a hockey player, Logan wanted to be a doctor, and Carlos
To be hit by a radioactive meteor and fight crime as Meteor Man.
Already taken.
But you can't use Meteor Man. It was a movie in the 90s.
No, never mind. So now that things are back to normal, they might as well try to live out their original dreams. Meanwhile, Rock Records rival Hawk, played by legendary voice actor Phil Lamar, who I've actually met before, believe it or not, has his own plan. See, he has this whole spat that's been going on for a while with Gustavo, where they're always trying to one-up each other. And so because of that, after hearing about the BTR news, he decides that in order to finally have something over him, he would take one of the members from the band and give them their own solo career. And after mulling it over, he lands on James. Meanwhile, Kendall gets a surprise visit from Gustavo, who claims that he has a plan to bring back the band. Though earlier it was revealed that the only way to buy back the rights of the band is by putting more or less his entire net worth into it, including his mansion. Such a choice is something he's likely only making because of the bond he's formed with the boys over the past 20 episodes or so. A bond that at this point has become so strong that he even lets them know about it, which is surprising because he's not into that mushy stuff. Y'all know how he is. But it's a good thing he did say this, because it's this prep talk that convinces the boys to take one more shot at the big time. All they have to do is find James. But when they swing by his house to see him, his dad, who I feel like rarely ever gets brought up in this show, says that a producer named Hawk swung by earlier to take him back to LA, which is something Gustavo does not take very lightly. So now after returning back to LA, the goal is to find James, start the concert training back up, and to kick off their first show so that everything else will fall into place, including their CD and the rest of their tour. They get a tip that he's actually back at the Palmwood, staying in apartment 2J, aka their old apartment, which is now totally decked out. There's even a sushi chef. But unfortunately, their pitch to get James back in the band doesn't go so well. as Hawk has promised him a pretty lucrative solo deal. So now their only choice is to find a replacement for him. They start holding auditions at Rock Records and aren't too successful. Everyone they've seen so far is lacking that talent that James has, so the gang is pretty deflated. That is until a dude named Skippy Hickenlooper comes in and gives a flawless performance, even down to the backflip. Name aside, they've pretty much decided that he's got what it takes to be the newest member of Big Time Rush. That is until, well, this happens.
I must now tell my Dark Overlord, Zorblock. Oh, Zorblock, the time of prophecy is upon us. Maybe we can't replace James.
Might be one of the funniest scenes from the show, honestly. Thanks to the failed auditions, they've basically decided to just let Big Time Rush remain a trio. After all, that does happen to bands all the time. Only thing is, now that they're down a member, their chemistry has kind of been thrown off. This causes Gustavo to crash out like always, which prompts the boys in response to do a little trolling. But in the midst of their performance of the Turd song, they get a little visit from an old friend. He's such a tryhard. Welcome back though, James. The boys celebrate the final piece of the puzzle being added to the band. You see, earlier we saw that thanks to all the alterations they're making to his image, both physically and metaphorically, James realized that Hawk isn't all he's made out to be. And even if it means missing out on a few M's, there's no place he'd rather be than with his best friends and bandmates. With the four of them back together, they all hatch a few plans to get the word out that their first ever concert is still a go. Some of them being pretty genius, might I add. Setup for the concert begins, and the boys are pointed towards their dressing room. But as it turns out, this is all just a trap to lure the boys into the sharp claws of Hawk. Or talons, I guess. Hawk ties them all up, and I'm not quite sure how. Like, you're telling me 40-year-old Phil Lamar was able to tie up James, for example? Come on, man. The height and size difference alone should have been enough for him to overpower him. Anyway, with 20 minutes left, Gustavo starts freaking out over the boys still not being out there. But Kelly, in her own way, tries to get him to stay calm. Back at the lair, the boys are desperate for a way out of the trap they're in. But Carlos, who has been trying all episode to become a superhero, finally gets his moment to shine as one, though not necessarily in the way he intended. I love when random but persistent side gags get satisfying payoffs. After untying everyone else, Carlos and the guys try to make their way to the concert on foot. But fortunately for them, James' old butler from when he was with Hawk Records is able to scoop them up and take them to their destination. Talk about good timing. Every good butler is there when you need him, even Jimmy Butler. Excluding this last playoff run, I guess. Taking only 9 shots in a playoff game without Steph Curry is kind of crazy, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, Sebastian, which is the butler's name, tries his best to get the boys there on time. But as the clock ticks, Hawk's confidence in his plan grows. So much so that he's showboating in front of Gustavo. With people starting to leave, Gustavo's entire career is flashing before his eyes. One of the constant things brought up in this episode is how the boys never let him down, and even though he's aware of their track record, he wonders if this is where their streak ends. Luckily, he doesn't have to worry about that for very long.
This is the part where you faint.
Hey, sorry we're late, Gustavo. Yeah, we got a little tied up.
I know a lot of people give the show flack for being corny with the sound effects or more or less playing out like a live-action cartoon, but when the writers and directors really lock in, they know how to not only make good stories, but make really gratifying moments that elevate them. No pun intended, I guess. The boys get up on stage and perform their hit song, Famous, which, although totally fits the theme of the episode, wasn't actually on the original release of the album they're supposed to be promoting, which is kind of funny. Yeah, what? I have most of the album added to my Like Songs playlist. What you gonna do about it? There's a lot to, I don't want to say unpack about the scene, but there is a lot to appreciate in my opinion. For starters, they do this thing where while they're performing, they go back and forth to the real life performance of them playing in Times Square, which is such a sick detail, I had no choice but to smile when I saw it. Don't get me wrong. When I talk about this or that scene from a few minutes ago where the boys literally don't let Gustavo down, I'm not saying that these are some genius or groundbreaking writing details, because they're not. What I am saying though is that as someone that's watched an insane amount of children's live action television for the past, well, 20 something years really, but specifically for my channel about 3 years, I've seen a lot of bland, cookie cutter, and sometimes straight up bad stuff. So when I see details like the ones mentioned previously, I appreciate them because, yeah, most kids sitcoms just aren't written this way. Like, I'm sorry, I know I'm yapping, but this is really cool. The episode ending this way, after 40 minutes of build-up, is just so satisfying. This episode played out like a whole movie, bruh. And to make this episode even better, remember what I said about how this one kind of ties into the pilot? And the pilot episode of the show starts off with the boys getting chased by a bunch of girls, which was kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to predict where they'd end up. Matter of fact, in this scene, James literally says, "This is what it's going to be like when we're famous." 20 episodes later, at the season finale, this one ends just like the pilot, but this time being chased for the reason that they actually want to be chased by girls, not some juvenile prank. Season finales mirror what happens in the pilot all the time. Rarely does it ever happen in shows like this though, and that's what makes it cool. Overall though, this episode is really good and 100% worthy of its runtime. Not only was there enough content to fill everything up, but the episode itself felt grand. This episode represents everything I like about BTR. Likeable and good-hearted characters, a positive atmosphere, tight writing, and fire music. This is not only probably the best episode of the series, but also, dare I say, one of the best Nick sitcom episodes ever. Like, there's really not much bad about it. I will say, this episode being the season finale did kind of give it something extra over the other episodes, if that makes sense. Like, it was trying to accomplish more than the average 2-part special. So in a way, it was kind of cheating to put it up against these other ones, but whatever, it's my channel, and I really like this episode. Now, on to the next one. Let me tell you, it is slim pickings when trying to find Nickelodeon crossovers to talk about, man. They got me talking about How to Rock, boy. I tell you. What's next? The legendary Dudas? It's time for the Duda Brothers. Man, y'all lasted 6 episodes. No, it ain't. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't know if this episode of How to Rock featuring Big Time Rush is actually a crossover. Because technically, while Big Time Rush was obviously a show, they were also still a band in real life. Matter of fact, IMDb has these guys listed as playing themselves in the episode, not their TV show counterparts. Kind of like when the Cheetah Girls were on Sweet Life way back when, but the Cheetah Girls were also kind of a group in real life too, so that wasn't really a crossover episode. However, I basically have no other crossovers to talk about. It was either this or like Young Dylan meets that girl Lele, and I ain't that washed yet. So we gonna count this as a crossover. First of all, there's a chance that some of y'all either haven't heard of the show or haven't thought about it in a while. So to give you a brief rundown of it, it is basically like Victorious but with less aura, and the main character is Lil Romeo's sister. Or Master P's daughter if you're 40. And if you don't know who either of those people are, I don't know, bro, she got a song with Jacob Latimore? So if you know who Jacob Latimore is, but not Lil Romeo, we're gonna have a conversation.
Hey, roll, watch it flow. It's time for the Romeo show. Holla, Romeo's on now, Romeo's on now. Stop what you're doing, cause Romeo's on now.
Jokes aside, the show is about a girl named Casey Simon and her band Gravity 5. They make music together, none of which is released, unfortunately. But one thing is for sure, that theme song slaps. Casey Simon runs for class president against popular girl Molly Garfunkel. Garfunkel? But that's not the name of Buddy from Smurfs? Doing such a task is quite the uphill battle though, as Molly basically wins every year thanks to her being the most popular girl in school. And yes, that is Skylar from Good Luck Charlie. Casey isn't doing too bad in the polls, but is lacking the support of the gamer community, apparently. So she enlists her gamer friend Kevin to basically run for class president, then drop out last minute and inform everyone who supported him to vote for Casey instead. One of the things that Casey wants to do in order to get more people on her side is get Big Time Rush, who happened to be in town, to perform at her campaign rally. Everyone doubts her abilities to do such a thing, and understandably so. But in the next scene, we see that she's not going to let their pessimism stop her.
Okay, was it just me or was that awkward?
It wasn't awkward. The baby was totally into it.
Yeah, a little too into it. I'm telling you, there's no way that we were the first people to ever sign that baby's face.
So, interesting enough, even though they likely aren't playing their TV show counterparts in this episode, they are still more or less written like them. This episode is kind of funny because there are so many reasons why Nick chose to do it. This was only the 6th episode of the series, and so naturally, this episode was used to garner ratings. Big Time Rush, being one of the biggest shows on the network at the time, was a good choice, but this wasn't a move solely made to help out How to Rock. When you look at the labels of the CDs and posters surrounding the band, everything is branded Better With You. This was because when the episode aired, BTR was in the middle of their Better With You tour, which is named after the song Music Sounds Better With You. One of the best BTR songs, by the way. So yeah, this episode was more or less done to advertise the tour, the single, and the album it was attached to, Elevate. Casey introduces herself to them and tries to put on some lie about her actually being related to their manager in order to convince them to perform at her school. They aren't really interested in hearing her out though, and instead ask if she wants an autograph, since that's what they're there to do at the end of the day. Eventually she gets carried out the room, making her quest to book BTR even harder. As if things couldn't get any worse for her, Casey starts to find herself in a pickle. Both Molly and Kevin's campaigns have been picking up. Kevin has resorted to catchy rap music to get people's attention, whereas Molly has resorted to slandering Casey's name and handing out stuffed animals to anyone who votes for her. Kevin at this point has actually started to like the idea of him becoming class president, especially since this could be good representation for the normal kids, as Casey and Molly have always been popular. Realizing she doesn't have much else she can do to compete with the two other candidates, she decides to announce the entire school that she can get BTR to perform there, without having any such plans actually confirmed. Just trying to speak it into existence, huh? Alright, you know what, I respect it. In the next scene, we see BTR fresh off of performing a show, heading back to their dressing room. This episode was written by Jim O'Doherty, who actually, fun fact, created Kickin' It. But I bring this up because Jim does not have any experience at all with Big Time Rush. And even though I mentioned earlier that the boys were written basically like they were in their show, it was more so a comment about their personalities and dynamics. The actual dialogue doesn't sound like anything they'd say in the actual show though.
Dude, you were awesome. No, you were awesome. Hey, I was awesome. No, you were terrible.
Casey tries again to convince the boys to perform at her school by sneaking into their dressing room, disguised as a pizza delivery guy. All the boys are disappointed that she wasn't actually there to give them pizza, which is completely valid. I'd react the same way. Casey continues her pitch from earlier by attempting to bring up a resonating point. After explaining she's basically already promised the entire school they'd come, she asks if they've ever had an embarrassing moment in high school that could have benefited from being saved by someone of the likes of, well, them. And the boys stop to mull it over, engaging in some deep thought.
So please.
Okay, hold up, I'm confused. How do you buy a pizza box with no pizza in it, right?
That's a good question.
Casey gets carried out by security and naturally assumes that her pitch wasn't successful. At some point, though, she realizes that whether they perform or not isn't important at the moment. Matter of fact, she's not even concerned with who wins anymore. Like how a lot of these episodes went, Casey gets taught a lesson in humility and being self-sacrificing when she finds out that Kevin actually ended up voting for her instead of himself. He decides that since they did have a deal, it would be right for him to keep up with it. Motivated by Kevin's actions, Casey ends up getting on the table to tell everyone to vote for him instead. At the end of the day, Casey only wants to be the voice of the people, but Kevin is the voice of the people, and he actually ends up winning the election. Love to see it. Who doesn't like a good underdog story? To make this even sweeter though, during the school celebration of Kevin winning, Casey gets a surprise visit from none other than a Big Time Rush, who are there to free Casey out of her sticky situation. Which, like, is nice of them, I guess, but if I was them, I would have just let her burn for real. You gotta live with your mistakes. You can't be out here lying to people and expect things to work out all willy-nilly. But this is a Nickelodeon show at the end of the day where that kind of stuff happens frequently. So, at the very least, this results in a good ending for the episode. As BTR performs, music sounds better. This one, for those who are unaware, samples and interpolates the classic Stardust song of similar name. Stardust being a French house group consisting of 3 people, one of which is actually one of the founding members of Daft Punk, my favorite music artist of all time. If I had $1 for every time Big Time Rush sampled a song from a group that consists of at least one member that's more so known for a much more successful group that I also happen to really enjoy, I'd have 2 nickels. And you know the rest.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
After the performance, we get this one last final scene of Gravity 5 and BTR interacting with each other. They start going back and forth about different venues they performed at, with Big Time Rush obviously having the more impressive feats. Despite this though, they actually mentioned they'd be totally down for potentially collabing with a high school band. Yeah, okay, they just said that to be nice. That's like me asking Kenny Beecham for a collab. But, hey, if you watching Big Bro, let's cook. Anyway, this is how the episode ends.
Do these guys know how to hold it down?
Oh, I think we know how to hold it down. Okay, here we go. Ready? Hold it down.
How to Rock an Election, the show's kind of crossover with Big Time Rush, is fine, I guess. It kind of reminds me of the I'm in the Band crossover with Sweet Life that literally only existed to boost the former's ratings. In a vacuum, this episode's message and specifically the story arc of Casey are actually pretty good. Problem is, nearly every episode of the show that I remember at least is like this. She basically learns the same lesson in every episode and never actually grows. This is basically what Foster's haters be saying about Blue, but that show is actually very funny, so it was worth it. Despite this episode not technically being a crossover, I do think the crossover aspect, if you want to call it that, was good. Realistically, with BTR being actual celebs in universe, there wouldn't be much room for a prolonged crossover involving all the characters. Even in this episode, they're basically constantly surrounded by security. But they managed to make the best out of it by giving BTR 4 scenes and even a performance, which was more than similar episodes have done. And I mean, the little we did see of Casey interacting with them was pretty fun. Likely because the 5 have already spent plenty of time together, with Symphonic being in a BTR episode, which resulted in another a banger song. I know you know. It's funny, BTR actually has a pretty decent amount of these episodes. Nick really tried to push them hard. They have this one, the Marvin episode, and even Penguins of Madagascar. Can't ever say Nick didn't try to get the band out there. Anyway, cool little episode. For more coverage on both shows involved, feel free to check out my guy, Zach Bennett. He has multi-hour videos on both shows. On to the next episode.